Pierce is freaking out. You're the only one that can help.
What makes you think that?
They're out there. He's the only one that can help. He says he's going to kill himself, but he doesn't want us to call 911 because he doesn't want to get in trouble for taking drugs.
I can't believe I'm doing this. I think I have to say goodnight.
Are you like a court-appointed guardian for these people?
No. They're my classmates.
Okay.
I'm going to crush myself to death with desks and tables. Yeah.
Is that a desk befitting a Beastmaster?
I never saw Beastmaster. I just wanted.
I'm coming in there, Pierce.
Those floating Mexican skeletons are like, my life is over. Well, when we build them floating skeletons without problem, what we pay for them.
I don't know how you spent the first 60 years, but I know in the last 2 months you've probably doubled the national average for amount of life lived per lifetime.
Well, I do have a young African American friend.
Yeah. And more importantly, you're dressed like a gladiator. Best for this. Why is it just a series of ridiculous attempts to be alive?
You're a hero. Yeah.
You say the party.
If I stay, there ain't be no party. I must be out there in the night. Take this. Our party needs to be safe. I'm there. Where there are masks, where there's tomfoolery and joy, I'm there. Sometimes come out in the night, sing this, watching, working, playing something early, sleeping. I can't sleep. 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 No. I'm bad. I am Batman. Or am I? Yes, I am Batman. Happy Halloween. I'm Batman.
Sound like Cookie Monster.
I'm Batman. That's Batman. Candy corn looks like tiny traffic cones. Yeah, it sure does. And like a candy traffic school. Little gingerbread man like a wheel. He's drunk. Look out. You're driving. But you keep wanting to eat yourself. Okay. That's one of my biggest fears. If I ever woke up as a donut, you eat yourself. I wouldn't even question it. Mighty tasty. It's cool to know other people think about this stuff too. Yeah. Yeah.
Now on, we'll refer to each other by our Spanish nombres. It will be Buenos dias, winger. Class dismissed. Hey, sir, wait. Out of his backpack.
Stop it, Troy.
say there are two friends, and they're in the same class, and one of them wants to ask the other one out on a date, like a grown-up date, but within biking distance of his parents' house.
Well, they could do something on campus. Tomorrow, there's a picnic with live music on the East Lawn. They're calling it A Night Under the Stars.
Cool. I bet Randy would love that type of thing.
Randy? Oh, I thought.
Oh, you thought? I can't believe I misled you like that. Listen, Randy can be the name of a guy or a girl. In this case, it is definitely a girl. Thanks for your help.
You're welcome. I hate you. I don't know why I have your children.
Damn, I picked the wrong couple class this morning. Jeff and Britta are dead there.
Are you okay? It looks like you have actual bedhead this morning.
In fashion, I must know.
And you missed an entire side of your face shaving.
And next month, someone wants to find. Here comes Vaughn. Bye.
Oh, crap.
Vaughn. Oh, the guy with the tiny nipples we did it with.
Oh, God. Come on, can we talk sometime? I'm really sorry about how things ended.
I'm sorry that I can't accept your apology because you're toxic, Britta. You know what? You're like the exact opposite of an antioxidant. Yeah. Get band practice late.
Can't we still be friends? Isn't the word later already short enough?
Let me talk to him for you. Even if it's man to man, that way we won't be thinking about our chubby thighs or they're not going to have babies.
Don't talk to Vaughn.
You know, I'm telling you, your hormones are out
Don't talk to Vaughn.
That is girls for talking to on.
I guess this is going to be a no-show of Livestream. People will come later, maybe.
Oh, I know exactly what he's doing. I had sons that spent 4 weeks doing that. His innocent mistake called me out. That boy's never in his car.
I lived in my car for the 70s. Nothing like betting a woman in the vinyl back seat of a Skyline. Of course, we didn't have the same safety standards back then, so no condoms. I tell you, before AIDS, sex was like shaking hands.
That's AIDS.
Well, girls, I forgot to tell you, I went to talk to Vaughn.
What?
Bad news is I could not patch up things that couldn't really get a number on. Good news is, finding new keywords in his van.
Oh, so I asked you not to talk to him and you completely ignored me.
Hey, Tiny, you're missing the headline. I'm in a rock band.
Well, I'd like to be there when the band finds out.
Oh, hi, Jeff. We were just talking about how in today's economy.
Living in your car, living in your car. You are living in your car.
I'm sorry, I'm not going to be cool. He's not living in my car. I'm just sleeping in it for a couple of days while I work out some problems with my condo. It's a very temporary issue. I'm just going to pay some meaningless fees, and then I'll put my locks back on the door, and that'll be that.
How are you going to get the money?
Believe me, Katie, when your sky moves.
Jeff, do you need a place to stay?
I don't know. My dad's kind of racist.
You stay with me in the dorms. My room has a bunk bed, which is kind of a misnomer because it's the real deal.
The next person that offers me charity or pity will be mentioned by name in my suicide note.
Oh.
Anyway, thanks for your advice about the night under the stars.
Of course. Anytime. Ever.
Now I just got to figure out what to bring to the picnic. It's my first college girl, so I really want to impress her. Would you mind helping me shop for this stuff?
Mm-hmm. I'd love to.
Really?
Sure.
Thanks. Later.
Hey,
Hey, want to see my place?
I can see it from here. 2 girls are making out on the hood.
Oh, my real place.
The condo board trying to blunt me by listing my places available. Look at those faucets. Handcrafted in Italy, 100% expensive.
Faucets are beautiful. You know what they would go great with? A home, which you no longer have. You need to move on with your life.
You know, move on with my life, schmoosh, schmosh, schmish, mosh, mife.
This condo is all that's left of me. Every part of it is a part of who I am.
Is that the day?
That part's for resale value. Saturday afternoons.
You know, downgrading your lifestyle is your chance to grow as a person, maybe even become one. You know, the less you have, the more you can be. You know what I'm saying?
There's a silver lining here, isn't there? You're attracted to bums.
Good night.
Come on. What's your dinner at my place?
I got a hot plate that plugs into a cigarette lighter.
Yeah, but your kitchen's being towed.
That's my house!
Can I live with you?
Yeah, cool. You want the top bunk or the bottom bunk?
Top.
Me too. Reaching for it. I win.
I really need to liquidate some assets. It's an emergency situation.
What kind of an offer is that? These are mint condition issues. I mean, the premise alone is priceless. The guy has the powers and strength of a spider.
No, your incredulity perplexes me, nerd.
Jeff, did I say anything in my sleep last night about farm animals or Brian Williams?
I don't think so. Cool.
Lucky Charms?
How are you so satisfied all the time, Abed? I mean, don't you ever want anything more out of life than cereal?
Sometimes I like to pour hot cocoa mix into cold milk and drink it like a cold hot chocolate. Called it special.
Someday you will know it by its true name, diabetes.
You're Goldie Hawn, Jeff.
I'm sorry.
You're Goldie Hawn.
Is it a legend?
No. In Overboard, she was just
Hey,
like
Carly.
wealthy, assertive, arrogant, got manicures all the time. But then she fell off her boat and it was a good
I
thing
should
for her.
probably
Ultimately, she realized she
quiet that. Yeah, absolutely. That's what I wanted to talk during the live streams about, is exactly what the paper will write up as. Oddly quiet live stream for right now. I'm going to do another one at 1:30 and we'll see if it has more people show up. But as far as the paper is concerned, you start with that list, and then what you're doing, it's a 2-page paper, simple, nothing too, nothing too extreme. It's not a formal paper. It's reflection based. You can use I in it. So don't stress about like it being an essay. It's just a informal paper. 2 pages about the self concept. So you're going to take that list of the 20 traits. You break them down one by one. Is this in my real self or is this in my self concept? And what you're doing in the paper is going to be really 2 things. You're going to go into what the self concept are and kind of explain the basics on what they are. But what I'm specifically looking for is that you're applying those things to your list. So it's definitely got some reflection to it, hopefully some self-help to it. That's something I'm definitely pretty big on, if you haven't noticed so far, is I like to assign things that you can take something out of as well. What you're doing is self versus self concept. So you have information on that in the PowerPoint. You have information on that in that 10-minute psych lecture. And then you can research, whether it's textbook or internet research, whatever you need on top of that. It's part of humanistic psychology, which is the humanistic approaches to therapy as well as a approach to personality. Break that down and go into apply the self concept into your paper for your list. And that's very simply all I'm looking for you to do. I'm okay if I get some papers that are a lot more reflection based, almost like it's like in ways like almost similar, like writing in a journal or diary. And I'm okay if I get papers that are more research driven, self concept. This is a clear example of the self concept from my list kind of thing. I'll probably get both of those directions, and I'm okay with either one of them. It's an informal paper, so it's not something that that I'm looking to be picky on in terms of that level of tone within the paper. Does that help? I know the one open-ended thing that can stress people out is when you're open-ended about exactly what, like, exactly how much research is going to basically be in that, like how much is going to be your normal research type of paper where you're explaining, identifying self-concept, describing self-concept. As long as I have that, that's all I need to see in there. The rest of it's all the reflection based. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm not trying to make this a complex assignment. I'm trying to make this a pretty easy assignment where your investment is more in creating that list, and going one by one through that list. That's a little bit more the time investment as opposed to writing paper. Okay, so to do that, you're going to now, after you have that list, you go one item at a time. So I usually would say to start at the end and work your way up, but it doesn't matter. Pick any one item, and you're going to look at that one item on your list, and you're just answering the question of, is that something that I really am, or is that just something that I think I am? The things that you really are in your real self, and the things that you just think you are going to be in your self-concept. So almost for sure, I don't want to say that it has to work this way, but almost for sure, on that list, if you looked at the things towards the top of that list, you're going to probably see things that overlap between yourself and your self-concept. So those are things that you both like to do and are good at doing them. And that's simplifying these terms, but that's really what it comes down to. So the whole idea of the self versus the self-concept is, in our real self, we get the things that are helping us improve, helping us reach our potential. So if you're looking at this on the PowerPoint, we get things in our real self that are helping us to self-actualize. We get things in our self-concept because there are also things that give us pats on the back in life. There are things that we get positive regard for, that are positive regard being the pat on the back that we get because people see us do something that we're good at doing, and they give us credit for doing it. They give us respect and approval for doing it, and all that's right in the PowerPoint towards the end, as well as those are the things that I'm going to talk about in that video if you haven't watched it, that I have for you. And that's the personality 10-minute lecture. I focused like 6-7 minutes, something like that, of it on this assignment. The end result of how this all works is we all have things that we like to do and that we don't like to do. Now, the one thing that's important to understand with that is when you're looking at the like category, okay, that makes sense, it's liking. But when you're looking at that don't like category, those are going to be things both that we dislike doing as well as the things that we're indifferent about doing. So the point being is that category is a lot bigger than the like to do category. Our like to do category, whatever it might be for you, but let's say it's, a quarter of the things that you do. And then the don't like is more like 75%. But the things that we like to do are the things that help us self-actualize. Those are going to be things within our real self. Then you also have things that you are good at doing. Those are the things that give us positive regard. Now, positive regard specifically in that part of the humanistic approach is definitely the thing that you're going to want to watch the video and pay attention to, because it is really important. The bottom line is there are things about who we are, about how we define ourselves, that we will end up defining not because we care about those things, but because we're just good at those things. And the basic rule of life is that good and bad happens to us. We all will have days that we just had a bad day. We had more bad happen than good happen. Those are days where we really need those pats on the back. We really need positive regard. And if you're having multiple bad days, if you ever get to the point of when it rains, it pours, well, now you're looking at times where we will start to sacrifice things that would be in our real self, the things that help us self-actualize, for the betterment of that, of positive regard. And what that ends up meaning is we're sacrificing our real self for our self-concept. Now, we all will do this in life normally, but we'll do it more when we're having bad days, especially if we're having a lot of bad days. So to give an example of that, I love singing, but I'm not a good singer. So that's not going to be something that people give me positive regard for. They're not going to give me a pat on the back because I'm singing, because I'm not good at it. You need to meet their conditions. Specifically, it's called conditions of worth. to get that pat on the back. I wouldn't meet those. So what would happen is I wouldn't get that pat on the back for those. Now, on the other hand, there's also something that's the complete reverse for me. There's something in my self-concept that I don't really care about, and that's playing the piano. So when I was younger, my mom made me play the piano. I didn't really want to. When I was a kid, I just wanted to bang on a drum set. My mom made me take piano lessons. But the thing is, I was also really good at it. So the end result was I still today can remember being at holiday parties and I'm playing the Snoopy theme song, the Peanuts theme song on the piano, and my family's all listening, saying, "Wow, you're so good. Give me a pat." And I still remember that today, even though I was 6 years old when that would be happening. There's plenty of things that we potentially can do because we are good at doing them. That pat on the back feels good. Even from when I was 6, I still remember that pat on the back today. So if I'm answering that question, I am ... Eventually on that list for me is going to be I play the piano. But it's there not because it's something I really care about. As a matter of fact, I would go as far as to say I don't like that I play the piano. And there's plenty of those different things. So I can give other examples as well. For something I love to do, I played football in high school, and I loved doing it. It helped me self-actualize, but I wasn't that good at it. I was good enough to make varsity, but I was just good enough to make varsity and sit on the bench. So no one gave me that pat on the back because I was never on the field. Another thing that I got the positive regard for, the pats on the back, is a lot of my examples relate to my mother, but my mom made me do gymnastics when I was younger, and I was actually really good at it, believe it or not. So everyone would go to that gymnastics meeting, give me that pat on the back, say, "Oh, good job," things like that. End result is we end up with 4 categories. We have things that we like to do and that we're good at doing. I would just say that's our happy place. We're going to do those things as much as we possibly can. But the thing is, there's less in the like to do category than the don't like. And there's also less in the good at than in the not good at, because the not good at are things that we're bad at and just okay at. So there's not a lot in that category. We do those things as much as we can. The top of your list for this assignment will probably have a lot of things in your happy place. Depending on each student and how their psyche is going at this point in time, that could just be 5 things, or that could be 15 things. It'll probably be somewhere in the middle of that. Those are going to be the things that we get both for. But then you're also going to have things on that list. This is the therapist type of counseling, self-help, why this is such a commonly used thing. As you get a little lower on that list, you're probably going to see things that would fit into the category of I am good at doing it, but I don't like doing it. When we like and are good at it, that's our happy place. And when we don't like something and are not good at doing it, we're just not going to do those unless we absolutely have to do them. But then you get these other 2 categories. You get a category of things you like to do, but that you're not good at doing. Those things only give you positive. Wait, I forgot which one I said. Things that you like to do, but you're not good at doing, that would only give you self-actualization. Something that you're good at doing, but that you don't like to do, would only give you positive regard. When we're doing things that we only get positive regard for, those are things that fall within our self-concept. Those are the times that we trick ourselves into thinking that we like doing something that we don't actually care about doing something. And that's going to be in our self-concept. And that'll probably be the bottom few things that are on your list. For some people, that might be most of our list, because there's going to be more things in that category than in the happy place category, simply because those are smaller, like I was saying. So, you don't have to do that. The exercise that you would do would only be I am ... So only the things that what you're specifically going to be writing are all the things that, most likely all the things that you are good at doing. Now, theoretically, you could have some things on this list that would fall on this list that are things that you like to do, but you're not good at doing. That actually can be a sign of you have a pretty healthy psyche. That's not going to be the most common thing in the practice of the exercise of this, but this exercise is used when people are, at that point when they really could use some help, or their psyche's not in the best place. So we won't usually see that category of it's something you like to do, but not something that you're good at doing. You could have that though. Most of the time, you're going to have 20 things that you're good at doing on this list. Maybe half of them, probably less for most people, but maybe half of them are things that not only are you good at, but also that you like to do. That's that happy place. It's giving you self-actualization as well as positive regard. The entire 20 things probably giving you positive regard. And that's what you're really focusing on. Not so much whether you dislike it or are indifferent to doing it. It's mostly just focusing that everything on this list most likely is something you're good at doing. So you're probably eliminating that whole just okay or I'm bad at doing it, because those probably didn't get written down for the I am ... You probably wouldn't define yourself as being the things that you're not good at. So what you'd be left with then are the overlap, where you have the things that you also like to do, and those are things in your real self. And then the other category for this exercise is probably going to just be the things that are in your self-concept, so the things that you're indifferent to. So it depends on how you want to, I guess, identify that. But I would write this more in terms of the positive regard aspect of these are things I'm good at doing. And I wouldn't focus too much on it's something that that I don't like to do. I mean, I guess it kind of is the reason that it's in the self-concept, but I would focus on that in terms of the self-concept, less so in terms of self-actualization. So the idea of like to do it or indifferent to do it, that category, that rating, that what's the word I'm looking for? That measurement, that relates to self-actualization. I wouldn't focus on this paper in terms of the self-actualization scale. I would focus on it more on the positive regard scale. But with that said, if it helps you to explain why that's there, by all means. That would be the reason why something would be in your self-concept, would be it something you're good at doing, but something you're indifferent to doing. But I wouldn't add those things specifically to your list, if that makes sense. Like if you're adding that to your list, then you're focusing on self-actualization scale. I wouldn't go and add a 21st thing, 22nd thing to your list as those things. Both of them. So as far as the how you answered the I am ... every single person will probably have a very encompassing list where they have things that are more behavioral, where they have things that are more cognitive, things that are more effective, where they have things that are hobbies, where they have things that are personality traits. That can be everything. So in no way do I want you to limit that. If you were going to have 5 things that are all about, general, like primary personality traits, I am an optimist, I am trusting, I am caring. That's great. And then if you have things that are more, I am a graphic designer, I am a writer, I am an athlete. All those things are all great to have. Ideally, I would like to see this list be very encompassing of all things. So all of those things. Don't think you need to focus on only one type of thing. Doesn't matter if it's behavioral. Doesn't matter if it's personality trait. If it's something that you would answer the I am ... put it on there. The only thing I would add to that is there'd be more to talk about in regard to things that relate to personality, just because things that are behavioral are a little bit more black and white. But I would want all of those type of things to be on there. And you can have things that are everything, completely cognitive based. You can, on there you could be I am analytical, I am logical, I am emotional. It could be I am warm, I am affectionate, I am sensitive. It could be I am artistic, I am you get the idea, I think. All I care about for that list is that it pops into your head. I am ... If it pops into your head, I want you to write it down. The one thing I don't want you to do with that list is I don't want something to pop into your head and then you to stop and think about it before you write it down. If it comes to your mind, I am this, you write it down. The evaluation of it comes after. That's going to be what we were talking about. As you break down each item one by one, that's when you evaluate. I don't want you to evaluate when you create the list. You're brainstorming the list. And that's the hardest thing about brainstorming in general is evaluation apprehension. People, when they're brainstorming, it's very difficult to get out of the back of your mind evaluating that before you suggest that. It's the exact reason why some students won't ask a question when it pops into their mind in the classroom. You start to wonder, is this a good question? I don't want you to evaluate your items right now. That comes when you finish the list. When you're writing the list, no evaluation. Does that help? Excellent. And for anyone who popped in to the chat, like in the middle of me going into that, I think the hardest part of this assignment for you writing it up is actually realizing that what I want from this is not a formal paper. I'm looking for something informal where you're writing up. I want most of your investment for this week to go into writing up those 20 things and then evaluating them one by one. The writing the paper is informal. You can use I in this paper. It's going to be reflectionary. You're going to go into what the self and self-concept are, at least in terms of what it is in your list. But what I'm specifically just looking is that you're applying it to your list. It's an informal paper. The actual paper itself, make sure it's 2 pages, but beyond that, it's informal. It should write up pretty quick. The time investment is very much so, I think, on the list. I think the hardest part from the questions that I've gotten and the people that I've been discussing this assignment with from last week that were getting a little ahead of things, the hardest thing it seemed like to understand is that this isn't a formal essay. This is just a 2-page response paper. It's informal. I don't want you to the effort I want is in creating this list. And then you're just going to be applying that list. You're going to describe what in your list is in the self concept. And there's a little bit of explaining the self and self concept certainly that has to go into it to do that. But what I'm looking for more specifically is the self-help part of things. This is something that I want you to be able to take something out of. I want you to be able to have something that's, some practical self-help from this, that you can look at this and say, oh, okay, this is good to know. That's why I chose this instead of, something more formal. I like that where I can. I like to be able to give you an assignment that does have some practicality, something you can take out of it. And this is, I think, a really good opportunity to do that. And as far as the PowerPoint is concerned, as long as you understand, especially the psychodynamic mind, so the id, ego, superego, that's the one thing that I'm not directly covering with the assignment for this week that I need you to understand for this week. So I posted a lot of extra information going into that. I do talk about it in the 10-minute lecture for a little bit. I posted an extra video with an example that I'm giving you going into it. And it's something that's talked about in the other extra videos for personality as well. So make sure between looking at the textbook and all of the extra information, make sure that you understand for sure the most important part is the psychodynamic mind. Make sure you understand defense mechanisms as well, and that there's a conscious and unconscious mind. But those are a little bit more described a little bit more straightforward in the textbook, I think. The psychodynamic mind is a very hard thing, no matter what, to just read in a textbook, even though I think our textbook does do a pretty good job with it. Right. Does anyone else have any questions that's in the chat right now? For those who might have interest, I plan on grading the discussion forums from yesterday. I'm going to try to finish those, getting all those graded today. I know everybody is very anxious to see scores for that, so I will be spending quite a lot of time today, just hopefully getting through everything. I will definitely get through everyone's questions, everyone's responses to the discussion questions. I'm going to say 90% sure that I will also get through the actual groups and their presentations with their answers and moderating their forums. But that I would say 90% I get through those today. Worst case, I finish them tomorrow morning. All right, so if you have any other questions, write them in the chat. Otherwise, I did what I wanted to do for today, was making sure that I would go over the self and self-concept paper. If you have any questions, write them in the chat. But otherwise, I think we're pretty much about done for the live stream for today. If you still have questions, if you popped in a little bit late, stop by at the 1:30 live stream, and I'm going to go over the basics of it again. And then same thing, whether it's right now or whether it's after I go over things at the 1:30 live stream, I'm still going to be answering any questions that you might have. Let me make sure I don't have any questions through email. Well, doesn't look like it. All right, cool. Like I said, I'm going to hang out if you have any questions, but if you don't have any questions, we're done for the live stream here, so you can head on out. If you have any questions or just want to chit chat, by all means, hang out. That's basically about it. Can you really quick grab tweezers for me?
What?
Can you grab tweezers for me really quick? I do have a cone of hair in my foot. They found it this morning. Hey, Bob. I have one of your hairs in my foot. Thank you for kisses. I saw your big yawn through the corner of my computer screen. I saw it. You going for a long one? I don't understand. What do you mean by evaluations, Samantha? Oh, like if you like how you would evaluate each thing one by one, is that what you mean? Like after you have your list of 20 things? to evaluate them one by one? I'm sure I can kind of create like something for a couple of examples of that. So like that's not going to go in your actual paper. So like I don't really have an example that I can give you from a past paper because that wouldn't actually go in your actual paper. I can certainly come up with something to kind of give you like the actual thought process of how it would look like. So if you wanted to include your list of 20 things, you certainly could. I'm not even requiring that your 20 list of 20 things go in your paper because the bottom line is some of those things you might write them down and you might say, all right, but I don't really want my professor reading that, and that's okay. But I can definitely come up with something. I mean, basically, what you're doing is like if you were to look at your list, and let's say first thing on your list is I'm a good friend. As far as evaluating that, it's just you looking at that and saying, okay, so I am a good friend. That is true. Is this something that I care about? Is this something that I like that I'm a good friend? Is this something that I really care about, or is this just something that I think I care about? It's kind of like conscious mind versus unconscious mind in that sense. Not kind of, it is conscious mind versus unconscious mind. Because all the things that you come up with on this list will be the things that you are in your conscious mind, not necessarily that you are in your unconscious mind. So if you start to go down that list and you start to get to things that maybe you get to something like I am, for the example I use for me, is I am a piano player. And as I get to that, maybe on that list, I would have I am a pianist. And I look at that and I say, okay, yeah, I am that. I'm good at doing that. But do I actually care that I am? Do I actually like doing that? And I might say, as I stop and actually think about that, say to myself, I don't really like playing the piano. I don't really care that I play the piano. That's kind of just something I've always done, but not really something that I'm actually been that interested in. And then you would just start to say, okay, that's something that is in my self concept, not something that's in my real self. So it's not that you have to like write that down specifically and submit it in any way. It's just you don't even have to write that down as you're going through it. It's just kind of going one by one through your list and then just kind of looking at each one of them and saying, okay, this is something that everything on that list is going to be things that you actually are good at doing because that's what this list is all about. Then you're going to have to answer, is this something that I like to do as well? You can have things that you are good at doing that you don't like to do. I'm a good cook. I worked in restaurants my entire life. When I was younger, I was always a chef in an Italian restaurant. And then as I got older, I was still always in restaurants as a server, as a bartender. I don't like cooking. I'm good at cooking. I get asked all the time to make certain dishes, but I don't like to do it. So that's something that would go in my self concept, but not in my real self. Cooking for me is a way to impress someone. So if I'm ever like in need of a pat on the back, yeah, I'll cook a meal because as someone would eat that meal, they're going to say, "Wow, this is really good. I can't believe wow, you could make this. That's amazing." But it's not something that I care that I'm good at doing. It's not something like I look forward to cooking in that day. That's what I'm really talking about. As far as writing that up, the way it writes up in the paper is just you're going to start talking about it in terms of your self concept. But in terms of the evaluating it from your list, it's almost just a yes or no type of thing. I don't think you would write about accidents in your real life. It's just answering I am dot dot dot. So I mean, sure, I guess that can happen. Like you could have had something happen in your actual life that is the reason that you would say that something on your list. I am. I'm trying to think of a pretty realistic example from that. Like, I mean, I guess you could have from an accident write something I am and then it be a negative quality on there. So you can have something like I am dishonest because you lied to, told an important lie to someone, or you stole from someone. I am a bad driver because you got into a car accident. Yeah, you could have those things on there, but I would imagine most of people's lists is probably going to have I am and good qualities. But yeah, if you have bad qualities because of accidents, things like that, by all means you could. But you definitely don't have to write about those things. So if you're thinking about this in terms of you have to write about adversity, you definitely don't have to write about adversity. Yeah, and when you're writing it in the paper, you're going to break down. You don't have to break down necessarily all 20 things, because like I said, there might be something that ends up on your list that you say, I don't really want to share that with the professor. And if you skip over, a couple of things on your list, that's fine. What I need to see is that you can apply the self and self concept to things on your list. If there's a couple of items on your list that you say it to yourself and you decide not to put on the paper, that's okay. I think there's a good possibility that maybe half of everyone has one or two things that they write up that they're not necessarily the most proud of things that ended up on that list, that they decide they would rather maybe not have me read. But you should definitely be breaking down um, a good amount of things on your list, and you're talking about the self and self concept. What's in yourself? What's in your self concept? If you notice any commonalities between them, um, whatever you notice, basically, everyone's paper in that sense is going to look very different, because this is something that this is going to be very different for everyone. Some people are going to have 15 things that are in their happy place that overlap between their self and self concept. And some people are going to only have like 3 things that do. So those papers are just naturally going to look very different, because the person that only had 3, a lot of their paper is probably going to be talking about how they have to start to bring their self concept closer to their real self. The person that has more overlap is going to be talking more about, okay, I just have to make sure I do these things as much as I can, make sure that I'm paying attention to these things, etc., etc. Um, so these papers for the 4 classes that are doing this assignment, I'm going to have about 100 submissions. And I will probably have 2 very different directions that they go. But so a lot of people are going to be writing in a direction where they're coming from a very healthy psyche that has a lot of overlap. So they have a lot of things in their real self. What that means. And a lot of people are going to be writing the complete opposite. I probably only have maybe 10 out of the 100 that are kind of split down the middle. It'll probably be those 2 directions. So I'm going to have papers that look very different. This is a informal reflection-based paper, so don't worry about it looking a little different. I expect that to happen, and that's not a problem at all if and when it does. Write it up the best that you can. The only way that I will look at your assignment and I will say, this is not good, this is not following the assignment, is if you're not using the self and the self-concept in your paper. If you're not describing these things on your list in terms of the self and self-concept, and if you're just saying, I am a good person, and there's nothing beyond that. There's nothing about this is something I really am or not. And ideally, being a good, having a good person should be more specific, obviously. But if you have something like I am sensible, talk about that in terms of the self and self-concept. That's the only way this would not be good, is if you ignore the self and self-concept. Those terms are important terms. You definitely have to research them a little bit. So as much as I can go over those in the example in the 10-minute lecture for today, and they're in the PowerPoint, you absolutely need to get some information on those terms between the textbook, between internet research, the extra videos that I have, my video lecture, the PowerPoint, put all of that together. I need to see that you understand what the self and self-concept is. So that is the part where if I don't see that, that's the only way. I guess there's two ways that you can not do well in this assignment. One is that you don't talk about the self and self-concept. I can't see that you understood it. And the other one is that I can see you didn't do a list. You're just talking about a couple of arbitrary things and only talking about the self, what the self is and what the self-concept is. I do need to see that you did a list. And as long as you're doing that, you're going to do really well in this assignment. Make sure it's 2 pages too. Inevitably, with this assignment, when I've done it in the past, inevitably I do get like 10% of my responses that are like 3/4 of a page. I'm like, great. It's just, this has a lot of reflection. The time and effort that you're putting into it is creating that list, breaking that down. If you're skipping that, that's when you're just not doing the assignment. That's when you're not putting enough detail. This is what I'm trying to say is this is 100%. If you give me a 1 page or less, it's not because you didn't have stuff to say. It's because you didn't put in the effort to doing those reflections. Do I have examples of what? Like in terms of a list, it's just whatever the list is for you. It's whatever comes to your mind. So for me, I would say I am a psychologist. I am a football player would be on my list. I am honest would be on my list. I am a good listener would be on my list. I am loving would be on my list. I am a good cook would be on my list. So on and so forth. But then when you start breaking those things down one by one, and I'm just making those things up off the top of my head. So if I was coming up with 20 things, I would need to think more. Like right now, not really anything else is coming to my mind. But then afterwards, you go through each one of those 20 things one by one. Now, of those things that came out for me, the top of that would definitely be things that would be in that overlap, that happy place, things that I like to do and that I'm also good at doing. But the last one that I mentioned, it only came to my head quickly because I used it as an example before. But the last one that came to my mind was that I'm a good cook. Now, that's something that I do. Yeah, I'm good at doing it, but I don't like doing it. So that would be something in my self-concept. The lower you get on your list, you're going to probably see more and more things that as you break them down, because you have to take a full minute, 2 minutes for each item, and you start to think about it. If I'm starting to think about it at the top of that list, then it's I am caring or I am a football player or something like that. Okay, those are things that as you think about them, those are things that I am. But then you're also going to have some things that you will have on your list. So for me, I am a good cook. That's something that I'm good at it. I like doing it. I don't enjoy cooking. I actually hate cooking. So the bottom line is, even though I'm good at it, even though I make a meal for someone and they're like, wow, this is really good, it's not something I really enjoy doing. So that's something that's in my self-concept, but not something that's in my real self. And that's what this assignment's all about. Yeah, in essence, that's what you're doing. If you have a list of 20 things, you will evaluate them one by one. And you have to spend a minute going over each one of them. Maybe the first couple things are pretty easy, but for 15 of the 20 things, you're going to have to spend a full minute thinking, all right, is this something I really am? Or is this just something that I think I am? Everything that you write on this list is going to be something that you think you are or you really are. The fact that you thought about it to write it on the list means you at the very least think you are that. The question here is this something that you really are or only something that you think you are? So you have to spend a minute with each item thinking about, is this something I really am? There will be stuff that comes up on your list that you're going to have on that list because you think you are, but you don't really care that you do that. You're indifferent to it. You even maybe don't like doing it. Something like cooking, I would go as far as it's something that I don't like doing. Then there's going to be things on your list that you might be good at doing, but you're indifferent to doing it. You do it just because other people like it. Someone could be a really good singer. This doesn't apply to me because I'm a terrible singer. Someone could be a really good singer, but not really care about singing. They don't really enjoy it. They just do it to do it. So sometimes someone might ask them to go to karaoke and they'll go and they'll sing, but they don't really care about singing. They're indifferent to what that means. So it's in their self-concept because after they sing karaoke, that person says, wow, that was awesome. But it's not something that they really are. And that's what this assignment is about, is figuring out the things that you really are versus the things that you just think you are. I'm not going to mark anyone down if they give me a list of 20 things and they say that they really are all 20 of them, but that means that that person is not very self-reflective. There is no such thing as a person that would have everything that they write down for this be something that they really are. That would be somebody that the bottom line is no one's real self and self-concept are perfectly incongruent. They perfectly overlap. That's actually an unhealthy trait if that was true. Now, there could be people who write this list and have a lot more in their real self compared to someone else. There might be a student that has 15 things in their real self and another student that only has 3. That can absolutely happen. But someone who only has things that they would say are in their real self, that's someone who doesn't have strong self-reflection skills. Someone who only had things in their self-concept, that's someone who probably has some form of maybe self-esteem potential issues or self-issues. But it could be someone that could be a sign of someone that just could really use talking to someone. I wouldn't look at that and say that that person failed the assignment. That's just probably someone that really could benefit from talking to someone right now. Sometimes we can be our own worst critic. Anybody else have any questions? We're getting close to the end of the live stream. I'll still take the questions that you guys might have in the last couple of minutes, but I also want to remind everybody if you still have questions, we didn't get through everything by the time we finish. We're going to be doing this again in an hour. If you wanted to jump back in, especially if you came in late, because most people here right now came in late. We only started. I believe it was just Carly and I in the chat. So for those of you who came in late while I was already explaining the assignment, come by at 1:30, and 5 minutes into it, when some people start to come into the chat, I'll explain the whole assignment again at 1:30, and then just answering questions that you might have as well. Okay, so if you do have any questions, throw them in the chat. I'm getting up for just 1 second, and I'll be right back in like 30 seconds. Ugh. Okay, I'm going to hang out for another minute in case anybody has any questions. Otherwise, like I said, I'll be back at 1:30. Sounds good. See you at 1:30, Dylan. All right. I am going to end the stream then for now. I'll see everybody back at 1:30 if you still want me to explain some things in some more detail. Oh, wait. Before I end it. You're very welcome, Samantha. That's it's a hard thing for everybody. I'm trying my best to be accessible for you guys, and if this is helpful, then I'm very, very happy to be doing these with everyone. It's not something when I teach online normally. I don't usually do these live streams like that. I usually do things mostly through email and then just scheduling like Zoom calls with people who have questions one-on-one. But because we met face to face, I thought that it was pretty important to still have some kind of an element, like we were in a classroom just going over some assignments, kind of like I do the first 5-10 minutes of every class. So I wanted to still have that, and thank you guys for showing up. Not it's not the whole class that does, obviously, but the 10% of every class that shows up to these, I'm very happy to share them. This keeps me a little sane too. So you're very welcome, and I wish that you had other professors doing it this way, or doing something like that for you. But I'm happy that at least this helps where it does for you and for anyone else that does. All right, I will see who is interested back at 1:30.